With thanks to the city of BRIMBANK across our neighbourhood and the world, the Sports Hour with Max Hatzoglou on BRIMBANK Live on Live FM.
Hello and welcome to the Sports Hour on BRIMBANK Live on Live FM. My name's Max Hatzoglou, I'm your host and I cannot wait to share the show with you today. We've got a big show coming up, we've got a guest coming on to talk about how to breathe, an important skill to have in life. As well as that, we're going to have our regulars on here to talk about the hot sporting topics, including the Australian Open, the cricket, the IPL auction that just happened, and lots more. So I hope you enjoy the show, and thanks for tuning in. And now we welcome our next guest onto the show, sports writer Patrick Morrow. How you going, Patrick?
Very good, Max. Pleasure to be on again.
Thanks for coming on, and you're here today to talk some cricket. And there's been a little bit happening in the world of cricket. The Sheffield Shield in Victoria, the domestic cricket competition, just started. And also the One Days has also started in the domestic Australian cricket competition. And there's also a little bit of cricket that's been happening in India via the IPL auction. And there's been a lot happening there with players going for ridiculous amounts of money. But we'll hand it over to you. What would you like to talk to us about today, first up?
We'll talk about the IPO auction. As you mentioned, ridiculous amounts of money for a lot of players. The most headline for the Australian players was Glenn Maxwell and Jai Richardson. They were both sold for a combined $5 million at the IPO auction. So it was 2.5 for both. So it was something, it was pretty outrageous. Another one that was picked up and probably got lost in all the headline was Riley Meredith. The Tassies bowled amazingly well. He went for $1.42 million Australian to Punjab. So he'll be at the Punjabi Kings with Richardson. It was quite crazy. Some of the money getting floated around. It's quite odd to see, seeing people getting auctioned off for a cricket team. Is pretty, what's it called? I'd say quite interesting and quite intriguing, and something that you wouldn't see anywhere else in the world in any sport. So it's quite interesting. I don't know, Jai Richardson, is that worth that money? He did perform well in the Big Bash, but at the same time, hasn't really played a lot of Test cricket. It was quite funny they were talking about Jai Richardson getting picked up in the IPL, and they had old highlights of him playing in the Test match against Sri Lanka. It's like, that's how long ago he hasn't played a game for Australia. So it's a long one. I think Glenn Maxwell getting picked, it just proves the point once again that he's probably the best, maybe the best T20 player we've got for Australia, in between Smith and probably Stark if he gets the radar going with the white ball. So the more interesting was a lot of the people who got unsold. Like the guys like the Nepalese leg spinner in Labuschagne, Marnus Labuschagne, also the Australian batsman, he didn't get picked up at all. Sean Abbott didn't get picked up, and he ended up making 70 odd in the Shield yesterday. So
yes. And we know you like Sean Abbott, Patrick. Recently, I saw your article on him and why he deserves to get a Test cap. More of a retweet Max, to kind of tell the audience that probably he should have got picked for the Test series, and for the next Test series coming up should be in the squad. And guys like that, I know. And then the IPL was weird. The auction back to the auction in the way, like, there was blokes who got picked that you'd go, how are they getting a game? And then you look at it and you go, well, it's only because it's T20 cricket, so they're going to pick whoever can generally be the deaf bowler or the big slogger. And Dan Christensen got picked up again. And 850,000 for Dan Christensen.
Yeah. But the most surprising one out of all of them was Cheshire Pujara, playing in his first IPL for 8 years. So that's a big pickup for Dally. He'll probably won't block. I say he'll go on the big advanced shots, but I'm surprised he wants to go back and play a bit of white ball cricket. I thought he was playing more first class cricket, but yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's quite interesting that someone like like Glenn Maxwell, for example, going for 2.52 million that's a lot of money, but it's fair enough that he's the highest sold Australian cricketer to go in the IPL auction. But it's intriguing that you get someone like Steve Smith, and a player who's at his level and maybe even better. A lot of people rate Steve Smith more than Glenn Maxwell. Steve Smith's playing Test cricket one days, but obviously this is a T20 tournament, and Glenn Maxwell's probably got it over him in T20 cricket. But for him to go at $389,000 and Maxwell to go at 2.5 mil, it's mind-boggling. It doesn't really make sense in a way. It's quite amazing. And then you got Dan Christian going for 850,000, Ben Cutting 133,000, which is probably a bit of a bargain there. He can bat and bowl. So that's a pretty good pick up by Kolkata Knight Riders. Kolkata, sorry, that was very badly pronounced. And then, are there any surprises for you in the auction? Someone that didn't get picked up, or anything that stood out to you from that auction?
I think what stood out was probably the English players, Jofra Archer and Ben Stokes getting picked up, and then there's a bit of controversy to do with that because the IPL is going to be played. I haven't looked at the dates correctly, but I know they're meant to be playing Test cricket when the IPL's on, and the argument is if they get to the final, or what are they going to do? So there's a big debate going on in the English cricket scene over what does Stokes and Jofra Archer do, because considering the fact they're probably wanting to play in the T20 stuff, but also want to play the Test cricket, and I think it might clash due to coronavirus. I think they're trying to make it sure they play it during India's better weather months, as in the dry season. So probably you won't see them playing Dubai again. I think they'll probably try and get it back to India because of the crowds coming back, as we saw at the Test match in England last week at Chennai. So I think there's a bit of a clash. I haven't looked at the calendar properly, Max, but I did hear there was a bit of a clash to do with, or what happens if they've got to play a Test match. I think they're meant to play against New Zealand or something before the World Test Championship, and that clashes with the IPL finals or something in that terms. So it was quite interesting what's going to happen there, and that was something that was surprising. And also the money they went for as well was quite low, considering how good Ben Stokes is as a batsman and bowler. And I think Jofra Archer is probably one of the better T20 bowlers going around, and someone that I would say is a much better T20 bowler than a Test cricket bowler. It was surprising how much money he went for as well. At the same time, I can see why the England Cricket Board are complaining, because they probably want their best two players to be playing in the red ball stuff before the white ball stuff. So, yeah, it's interesting how what's going on there. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something, there's a player from Australia that stands out with that, and that's Mitchell Starc, who didn't put his name forward for the auction. And I feel like for him, he's missing out on all this income that he could be earning. Surely he gets rewarded in some way for putting his country first, and by not playing in the IPL tournament, so that he's fresh for the summer. These days you hear, a fair few players sort of getting tired at the end of at back end of the summer, and they're sort of fatiguing, and they don't want to come back and finish the Big Bash season and stuff like that. But you should, I think, credit is due to Mitchell Starc here for probably putting the country first by not playing in this tournament where you could earn so much money. It's a tough one, but I think he's doing a great thing, because I bet you next year when the Big Bash is happening, he'll probably be playing games that he can fit in when he's not playing for Australia, because he's feeling fresh compared to some of the other players that have played a big IPL tournament and then they're coming back, and after not much rest, then they're getting into an Australian summer. I feel like there's a little bit of rewards that should go Mitchell Starc's way, because he's missing out on all this money from the IPL. And I don't know the reason why he's not. He didn't put his name forward, but I think whatever, by not playing, he's doing a good thing for probably his own body and his own cricket for Australia. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, and if anything happens with him by not playing in the IPL. But you see players like Aaron Finch, Marnus Labuschagne, then they didn't get picked up, unfortunately for them. But it's going to be good. Alex Carey as well, Sean Marsh, Matthew Wade, Sean Abbott, your man, Patrick. And then all these other players like Wes Agar, who had a great BBL tournament, they didn't get picked up. So they're going to be fresh for the summer, which is a positive. And I feel like there should be some sort of, I don't know, they will benefit from not playing because they'll be fresh. And then, which is a good thing. But we'll move on. Were there any last things you wanted to point out in the IPL and what happened?
Oh, just quickly, I think the players who you mentioned who did not get picked up, I think it's quite unfortunate. I think also the thing that people don't understand with this IPL auction is it's very like the NBA draft. It's very just, we probably have this bloke. We're going to probably pick up 4 guys who we know we're going to pick up. And the next, 7 to 15 blokes, because it'll be about 24 in a squad, because you need your 13th and 12th man. Probably they're picking players up. Also, the BCCI have a lot of control on what actually does happen in the auction. So, and that's something where a lot of people have questioned, why have not Aaron Finch and Sean Marsh and those likes have not got picked? And probably it's just on form, and probably they look at what they do in the overall T20 competitions and go from there, which can sometimes be a bit of a hit and giggle comp as well. Like, you look at the Pakistan Super League or the Caribbean Premier League, it's not all the top players playing in that, and that probably downgrades it a bit. Even the Big Bash can have that. Even the Big Bash can have that issue as well. So probably people question, the standard of what they're playing, and you can't help it when there's a test series going on and you can't have the top players playing. So it's kind of, as you were saying, it's a positive that they're not playing, and I think gives them a rest. Maybe that will help those guys focus on their technique better. Probably someone like Aaron Finch probably doesn't need to be playing T20 cricket. Probably needs to go back and play a bit of red ball or even one-day cricket, trying to just build the technique again, because his technique's been found out a few times, especially in the Big Bash. So that's something that will be interesting to see. Yes,
absolutely. And we'll watch that with a keen eye. But we'll go now to, it's an amazing the IPL auction and what happens during that period. And it's quite remarkable. And it's definitely worth taking a look at the list of players that have been sold and the amount of money they've been sold for. You just got to, the issue I find is you got to convert the currencies so you can sort of figure out how much they're actually earning in Australian dollars. We're going to pause our interview there with Patrick Morrow, and we're going to go to our next interview, which was with a new guest onto the Sports Hour, Connor Kennedy. So I hope you enjoy it. And now we're going to welcome our next guest onto the Sports Hour, a personal trainer, a nutrition coach, Connor Kennedy. Welcome to the show. How you going?
I'm very well, thanks, Max. Thanks for having me. G'day, everyone. I'm happy to be here.
And thanks for coming on. It's a real privilege to have you on. And you're coming from a different sort of perspective. Typically, we get sort of the sport fanatics and the sporting fans and sort of the people that love sport and play sport. And that's certainly you. But you also have a little bit of nutrition information and knowledge, as well as personal training. So it's great to have
Absolutely.
You on. Yeah, and we're really looking forward to having you on today. And we're here today. We're going to get you on over the next few weeks, over the next few shows, to talk about different things that you'd work with, that you work with your clients with, such as breathing, yoga, meditation, exercise, diet, sleep, all sorts of different things. So each week we're going to have you on to talk about each aspect and those different topics. And today we're going to kick it off with breathing, which is an interesting one, and I'm really looking forward to hearing your insights about it. And I'll kick it off with the basics of breathing, and breathing through your nose versus breathing through your mouth, and the differences and what is best. Because there's people out there like me that probably don't know exactly this information. And what can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Breathing is something, it's really interesting. It's something we all naturally do. Our body looks after it for us. We don't have to think about it. But there's actually a big difference between breathing and breathing really well and really effectively. So a lot of people ask the question, which is better, nose breathing versus mouth breathing? Nose breathing is much, much better for you. So first of all, it's because the body actually designed the nose more specifically to breathe more than the mouth. The nose adds warmth and moisture to the breath, which makes it easier to get into the lungs and oxygenate our parts of our body in the tissues. So there's actually been lots of studies done on it. Kids who have breathed through their nose versus breathed through their mouth have turned out much, much better later on in life. And kids who have breathed through their mouth chronically at an early age have led to all sorts of problems with not just their respiratory system, but other systems in the body. So one thing to practice is first of all, definitely breathing through your nose all the time. Whenever you can think about it, make sure you're breathing through your nose.
Yeah. And with that, so as you said there at the end, like you should always be trying to breathe through your nose. Is that always the case, or is there times where you should breathe through your mouth and that's actually the better option?
Yeah, good question. So there are times where you will have to breathe through your mouth. Okay. Now, breathing through your mouth is a lot more efficient, a lot better for you on the exhale. So it's usually fine to breathe in through your nose and then out through your mouth, right? But during exercise, often we can't get enough air in through our nose. It's just not possible because the mouth allows us to take in more air. So although the mouth isn't efficient at getting oxygen through our body to the different parts, we might have no other option during intense physical exercise. And if this is the case, then obviously you'll have to breathe through the mouth there. But whenever possible, when you're not doing intense physical exercise, it's definitely better to breathe through the nose. In through the nose.
Yeah. So it's in like, as we are right now doing this interview, the best, you breathe in through your nose and then out through your mouth. Is that?
So definitely in through the nose. How you breathe out doesn't matter too much. Whatever's more comfortable for you. Some people will prefer out through their mouth. Some people will prefer out through their nose. Personally, I do a bit of a mixture of both. But yeah, it doesn't matter too much, but make sure you're breathing in through the nose. Yeah.
And as you said earlier, like for those people that do sort of have breathed the wrong way from a young age, what are some of the effects, like the negative effects from that? And do you know sort of specifically, I know it's a bit of a, I'm putting you on the spot here, but do you know sort of some of the effects, how it has affected some of those people that haven't breathed properly and built the good habits? Yeah,
it's actually really interesting. The biggest thing is that they find it just harder to breathe later in life. They can't get as much air in, and so their whole respiratory system becomes less effective. And when the respiratory system is less effective, then we can't get as much oxygen to all the other important parts of our body. So respiratory system is really key to everything, so we can get oxygen to all of our tissues and all of our muscles and everything, especially if you're a sportsman, an athlete. And so they've actually done studies on athletes and AFL players actually, and what breathing through your nose does at an early age is it actually has an effect on your jaw. And so if you look at a lot of the top athletes, they'll have a really chiseled jawline because they're nose breathing from a young age, which helps their performance a lot, and it gives them a chiseled jawline. It's an interesting fact for you.
Wow. That's I'll look out for that then. Look at elite athletes and their jaws. And can you tell us a little bit about the breathing with the diaphragm? And there's a test I hear that's involved with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So personally, I think even more important than breathing through the nose is breathing with the diaphragm. And a lot of people might not know what I'm exactly talking about when I say this, but there's a quick thing you can do to see if you're using your diaphragm. And when you take a breath, it should be completely just your belly moving, just your stomach. There shouldn't be any movement in the chest, nothing in the shoulders. So if you're lying down on the ground, you can test yourself and you can just notice your breathing. You can take in a few deep breaths and look at what's happening. Don't think about it. Most people, I guarantee you, unless they've actively practiced belly breathing, will be using their chest a lot more. Now, why it's actually important to breathe with the diaphragm is like I was talking about with the nose breathing, it helps oxygenate the body much, much better than breathing through the chest, because we can get more air in and it gets to deeper parts of the body and fills up the muscles with a much higher oxygen capacity when we're using our diaphragm as well. So you'll often see like a lot of people that struggle with asthma, you'll look at how they breathe and it's just all coming from their chest because they just can't get any air deep in the lungs. And so that's why diaphragm breathing is really important, because we get that air fully in. And not only this, but when we breathe through our diaphragm and our stomach's moving up and down, it actually massages our intestines, which can actually get tight, believe it or not, behind the abdominal wall there. So when we breathe effectively through the diaphragm, it actually loosens everything else up in the core as well there.
Yeah, wow, that's it's interesting that you say people with asthma, how they it's all breathing through their chest, and I remember when I follow you on Instagram, Connor, and I watched that video on how to breathe, and I did the test straight after you described it in the video and told the viewers how to do it. And yeah, like it feels a lot better breathing and just with the belly coming up and down rather than the chest. And it's amazing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it's amazing how people with asthma are actually doing that. Like for most of the time they're breathing and it's their chest coming up and down. That's quite amazing. And it's really good that you're sharing this information, because when I first watched that video, that's when I was like, wow, now I know how to breathe properly and what I actually need to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you are watching and you do this little test on yourself and you notice that you're breathing a lot through your chest, or it's not all coming from your belly, which it should be, then don't panic. There are things that you can do to fix it. Okay. So the easiest thing you can do is just actively practicing this. You get so much better at belly breathing through practice. Even a year ago, I wasn't a full belly breather at all. And now, after only a couple months of practicing it, now it's just all the time I'm breathing through my belly, whether I'm thinking about it or not. Okay, so the biggest thing is just practice. But there are actually ways you can kind of make it easier for yourself to breathe through the diaphragm. So first of all, if you take your hands and you put two fingers together, make them little kind of knife edges, and you rub the insides of your ribs just underneath your rib cage. You rub all of that area there. I'm not sure if the viewers can see me or not, but you rub underneath the rib cage all the way along, and then you go up the sternum and you rub it along there with your knuckles. Now this just massages the diaphragm and kind of tells it, okay, it's time to work, it's time to activate. So you can go just under the collarbone here as well. This doesn't take very long. 15 seconds is all you need to do. It gets the diaphragm activated a bit more. And then there's one more thing that I've found has really helped me use the breathing more effectively through the diaphragm, is to pretend that you're smoking. So you get 3 fingers, put them together like this, put them in your mouth, and then try and take a deep breath. And the fingers are there making it harder for you to breathe. So the breathing muscles have to work harder to get that breath in. It activates them. You can take 3 or 4 breaths like that with your fingers in through your mouth. And you'll find that after you do that, it becomes easier to breathe because the muscles have switched on and they've activated.
Yeah. Thanks for that, sharing that, Connor. And That's great to know. We're doing that every single minute of our lives. So
Absolutely.
there's nothing much more important than knowing how to breathe.
Yeah, completely agree.
Yeah. Now, Connor, I wanted to ask you a little bit about breathing under pressure in competition. So while we're playing our sports, while we're doing a workout, exercising, can you tell us a little bit more about that? I know you touched on it earlier, but could you tell us a little bit more about that and sort of clear it up for all the sports people out there and everyone that does exercise?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So two things, they're slightly separate, is breathing during working out and breathing while in a sporting competition. You'll want to be breathing in slightly different ways. So first I'll talk about during sport, where it's really intense. You might be in the middle of a intense game, and like I was talking about before, it might be too hard to get the breath in through the nose. And so if that is the case, you try to breathe through the mouth. But it really just stems back to the principles that I've been talking about. You try to get in as deep a breath as you can, and you try to make sure it's through your belly. So obviously, if you're in the middle of an intense game, it's hard to think about this. But if you've got, like a minute break or something, or you're just on the other side of the field or something like that, you can just remind yourself really quickly about your breath. You can take a couple of deep belly breaths. This will calm you down. It'll help get the oxygen flowing around the body into the muscles that you need. And this will make a big difference in your sporting competitions. Now, during exercise, how we want to breathe while we're lifting weights is we always want to exhale on the effort phase. So if you don't know, when you're lifting weights, there's called the concentric phase of the movement and the eccentric phase of the movement. Now, the concentric phase of the movement is when our muscles are working hard. It's when the muscle is shortening. So on a bicep curl, it will be when I'm curling the bar or the dumbbell up to my bicep. That's the concentric phase because my muscle is working hard and it's shortening. So that's a hard phase. And the eccentric phase is the opposite. It's when the muscle is lengthening. It's often the easier phase because humans are 20 to 30% stronger eccentrically than they are concentrically. So when we're breathing during working out, we want to be exhaling on the effort, on the concentric phase. So for example, again, if you're doing a bicep curl, when you're curling up, you breathe out. Now, when I'm working out, I usually find it easier to breathe out during my mouth when I'm exerting the effort. And then if I can get enough air in through my nose, I breathe back in through my nose on the eccentric phase of the movement. Okay. So it does take a little bit of practice. And then after a couple of workouts, it starts to come naturally. But you also want to make sure you're as well as keeping a stable spine and everything, you do want to make sure you're still belly breathing during this time. And this will ensure that you're able to get that oxygen around to all of those muscles, which is so important. So, like I said, you'll be breathing out through your mouth on the hard part of the movement, the concentric part. And then you'll coming in through your nose, if possible, and through your belly.
Yeah.
On the easy portion of the movement, on the eccentric phase. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So when the effort's required and you're pushing something or pulling something, that's when you're breathing. You're breathing out when you're putting in the effort. So when you're about to hit a ball,
absolutely,
that's when you're breathing out.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're doing like a squat or something, and when you're extending up, when you're pushing up the hard part of the movement, that's when you're breathing out, and you can extend that out for that portion of the rep. And then when you're coming back down and you've got a couple of seconds, that's when you breathe in through the belly. You set up for the next rep, and you explode back up with your out breath.
Yeah, I'm eager to go on.
Yeah, it sounds complicated, but a bit of practice, this will really help you out.
Yeah, I'm eager now to go out and go to a workout or just go and do something and make sure I'm breathing the right way. Thanks very much.
It's something not many people think about, isn't it? People just think breathing happens naturally in our life, and it does, but there's a huge difference, like I said earlier, between breathing well and just breathing.
Well, Connor, thanks very much for sharing this interesting insight into breathing. We're really looking forward to having you on over the next few shows talking about different sort of topics. We really appreciate your time, and for the listeners out there, you can jump on his Instagram page. I'm sure you don't mind me advertising this, Connor. Connor Kennedy. If you just search that up, you can find him on Instagram. So really appreciate your time, Connor, and I look forward to chatting to you over the next few weeks.
No, thank you so much for having me, Max. It's been a pleasure, and I hope this helps some of you out there out.
I hope you enjoyed that interview with Connor Kennedy. Now we're going to resume our interview that was playing before with Patrick Morrow. So I hope you enjoy that. We'll move on now, Patrick, and there's been a little bit happening in the Shield. New South Wales played against Victoria, and it was a close game, low scoring, and Victoria ended up taking the chocolates. There were a few special performances in that you saw and wanted to highlight today.
Yeah. Well, it was an interesting game of cricket. I watched some of the first day and second day and most of the third day. It was quite of a tricky game of cricket to bat on. The pitch was quite green early on. Sydney had a lot of rain, so it was going to be a lot more interesting than the one-day game they played a couple of days beforehand, which is pretty much a road at North Sydney Oval. And Steve Smith was belting it all around the place. He definitely looked out of touch there. Steve Smith, he got caught by Mitchell Perry, the Richmond player who got his name up into the 15 minutes of fame this week. With a beautiful outswing ball that got Smith caught again. Just smart bowling and probably done his research really well. He took 5 wickets for the match, and Scott Boland took 5 wickets for the match as well. Victoria played really well, considering the fact the pitch was doing a lot early on. Moses and Reeks batted really well. I think he made about a 60-odd. Sean Abbott, my man, he made a crucial 73 in the second innings. He was hitting the ball all over the place. At one stage, New South Wales in the second innings were 8 for about 70, I think. So they were in trouble and needing to put on a lead to make sure that Victoria had a tricky chase to get. And they did have a tricky chase because Nathan Lyon spun the web again, got 10 wickets.
Opened the bowling.
Opened the bowling as well. So it was a bit of a traditional SCG pitch in a way, Max, with the ball spinning and steaming around. And it all got a bit tricky for the Victorians at one stage, still needing about 50 to win with about 4 wickets in hand. And then Jake Fraser-McGurk finally stepped up and he made a lovely 34 that probably, again, proves why he's picked in the Victorian team. Finally he's done something. I was questioning his selection beforehand, but I think, that 34 justifies why he got picked, and good on him. If he keeps making these runs and he's, making runs in front of Russell Arnold and the likes, he'll probably get the call up to play for Australia when he's 21 or 22. So it's looking really good there. And I think Victoria, some of the selection of the players were quite interesting. There's a lot of guys in the one-day team that probably could play in the Shield team. I think Xavier Crone was a bit unlucky in the one-day game, got hit around a bit. North Sydney Oval was a tough one to play on, and he was someone I was surprised who didn't really get the call up to play at the red ball level. He does look really good, and he does have the red kookaburra in his hand. So, but Nathan Lyon took 6 for 21 in the first inning and really looked like he was going to win him the game for New South Wales. But Fraser-McGurk stepped up when it needed, and they got the job done there. So that helps Victoria. I think that gets it back into a Shield final contention. So that's really good. Well, for New South Wales, that may be their own fault for playing on a real, green deck early on. Probably could have made it a road and batted it out, So that's how it rolls.
Yeah, and there's one thing that I've been thinking about, and I've been onto it for a while now, and it's Steve Smith and how to get him out. Now, in this game, both innings he went out sort of nicking the ball. The second dismissal was controversial I'm pretty sure it came off his thigh and caught his thigh and made a little noise. And the guys behind the stump rightfully appealed, because how would they know what it's come off, whether it's his bat or his thigh? But the replay proved that it probably wasn't his bat and it was his thigh, and he got caught behind. But beside the point, he went out both times sort of fending at a ball outside off. Now, I think that is the spot to bowl to Smith, because the way he bats, he steps across his stumps. He gets his pads in front of his stumps. He wants bowlers to bowl on the stumps and on his pads, because he's so good off his pads. And that's why he steps across, I think, and that's why he opens up his stance, so that front leg is out the way, so he can hit everything off his legs and through the leg side. And bowlers fall into the trap of trying to bowl on his pads and get him out LB or bowled. And I just think that's not the way to do it. And a lot of players for years have been getting sucked into that. A lot of teams, a lot of captains have been sucked into trying to get him out bowled and LBW. But the best way to get him out, I believe, and it happened in this game in both innings, was caught behind, bowling just outside off on about the fifth stump line, get him to play cover drives. The best shot for if you're playing against Steve Smith is you want to see him playing cover drives, because you're going to sneak him off. And I think that's the best way to get him out, because he doesn't step towards the ball too much. His front foot step isn't big at all. He loves to play off the back foot. He waits on his back foot. If you can get him coming forward, playing cover drives, or even just trying to block a ball outside off, that is what you want. And keep an eye on it for me, Patrick, because I think this is figuring Steve Smith out. And he's such a good player, because he'll probably leave about 20 balls that you bowl just outside off. But when you get to the 21st ball, or maybe the 30th ball, hopefully he nicks it. And I think that's how you get Steve Smith out. That was proven this game. He went out bowling that fifth stump line nice and full, not too full. You want to obviously hit a length. You don't want to give him half volleys. But that's how I think you can get Steve Smith out. And it happened this game. And every time I see people bowl to Steve Smith, that's all I think about. And yeah, it's in. What do you think? This is something I've had a deep thinking about. I've thought about this for a while, and how to get the one of the greatest batters ever, really. How to get him out. And yeah, I just hope that continues to happen. Well, no, I don't hope that. I hope my method is proven and it works. But
well,
Steve Smith,
you're helping out all the bowlers out there, so I'll give you credit there. But as you were saying, and I can repeat the same thing you were saying, but I'll just say it in different way. But I'll say that the one thing that people have worked out, that Steve Smith is he's offside, he's onside dominant, and also also, as you were saying, his cover drive, for him to play his cover drive, the one thing that doesn't help him is his head. And you know this well, Max, as a batsman. You know that if you play a cover drive, you've got to have your head still to the shot. His head is not still. His head is up in the air. So he's probably looking like he's going to hit the ball. But probably as he's hitting the ball, he's probably playing it and then going a little bit earlier than he should. And then his head's in the air. So as he's playing and he's missed it as he's trying to play it. So it's a bit like us. It's kind of like someone going down the ground and probably missing the ball as you normally do. You know what I mean? So something like that in a way, and that's something I think he will have to work on with his technique, and probably something that he might need to go, hey, to someone like Ricky Ponting, who was a perfect example of a cracking cover drive. If anyone wants to see how to play a cover drive, watch Ricky Ponting's highlights, or Steve Waugh's. Probably those two guys would be the perfect two blokes to sit down and talk and go, well, what am I doing wrong playing the cover drive? And they'll probably point it out to him. Your head's not going still and your feet are not moving. Yeah. And that's the thing that I think he's getting caught out. And I think the bloke who started this whole rot has to be, and I've got to give credit to him, is Stuart Broad. He found out the way to do it. And I think what happened in Trent Bridge in 2015 probably gave the blueprint to other bowlers around the world of how to bowl to him. And Some days he gets onto him, some days he doesn't. And the one thing that I think a lot of bowlers have worked out, it's a bit like baseball. You got to kind of bowl not to his hitting zone. You probably need to do what they do in baseball and not throw in the zone. They probably just throw it out wide, throw the ball, and then hope for it that he swings and misses or has to play it. And C. Smith's an eager batsman. He's very severe. Him and Marnus, as I was saying, they love to get on strike, love to score runs, they love to nick it around, and probably that's his downfall. Just too impatient, especially in the first innings, where probably you just need to settle down and just let Perry bowl to him. And that's no disrespect to Perry. I just think if you see Smith, you probably should be able to face a guy bowling 120 kilometres bowling out swing, and probably should be able to hit him off the cover. And it's like, but that's how it rolls. And there's going to be days where he'll cream that cover drive, Max. So you got to look at it both ways and go, well, and you know what? He's allowed to have a blimp once in a blue moon. So we'll see what happens. See what happens in the next fixture. If he does the same thing again, then I would question. Then I'd probably question his technique. I think his technique's been under question for a little bit now. He's getting older as well, Max. That's something to think about. The eye does lose its touch as the years go on, especially at that level to play that elite level to be that good. It is quite hard to hold that level. So yeah, but also as we'll move on here with Queensland and Tasmania. Someone who's come back into form is Joe Burns. He made 171 in Queensland's first innings of 275. He was the only one to get over 50. As Tasmania in their first innings made a very nice 332. Caleb Jewell made 140. He batted really well it wasn't much a bit of a road, but it did do enough for the bowlers. The likes of Mark Stickety got a couple of wickets. Xavier Bartlett, also for Tassie. The man from the Melbourne Renegades, Seymour, bowling his right arm off spinners and then bowling his medium. So doing with the Funky Miller kind of worked for him as well. And I think they even brought on Jake Doran to bowl a couple overs. So Tassie had one of those days with the ball a little bit. They were getting a few wickets with their part-timers. So, but Joe Burns got back in form with 171. That's really great for him. I'm really pleased for him. I think he really needs to get those big runs going again and probably put pressure on the likes of Pekoski and that. And to be fair to Pekoski, he's got to get a shoulder injury. He's going to get shoulder surgery this week with his shoulder. So probably Burns, if he can probably get some runs going, he'll probably can get back to that form of playing Test cricket again. And hopefully he does, because I think he's been a bit unlucky recently, and hopefully he can continue that form. And as we're speaking today, day 4 is today. So if anyone's they want to watch the game, be an interesting one. Queensland need 277 to win. So next week we'll talk about hopefully a result for Queensland. Hopefully they get the win, or Tasmania get the win on the other. So it's a pretty even game of cricket.
Absolutely. And then there's also the New Zealand taking on Australia in the T20 internationals, which that starts on Monday. That'll be on Foxtel and KO, which you can tune into at 5 p.m. So that'll be great to watch. Good time, that start time. And that'll be intriguing. And we'll sit back next week, I'm sure, Patrick, and we'll assess where our T20 men's international team is at and how that series is going. I think it's caught up on us a bit, Max. I don't think anyone's really thought about there's going to be a T20 series against New Zealand. We were also meant to play a Test series against South Africa, as we said before. With South Africa and Australia, with the postponement of that Test series due to the COVID issue, and we're living in this post-COVID world. So it'd be interesting to see how New Zealand go with. They had a lockdown only recently, so I'm surprised the series is still going ahead, considering the fact that they've had lockdowns and restrictions on crowds and that. So be good, though, to see a packed crowd in Christchurch for the first T20. Quite interesting, Australia not going with a stronger side. They've kept the same team as they were going to go for before South Africa got postponed. So that's interesting there. And then on New Zealand, on the other hand, they haven't played a game of cricket since early January, I think, or mid-January. So it's quite interesting. This series has come out the blue a bit. So
It'd probably be a nothing series in the context of world cricket, but it'd probably important for Australia to kind of win, just to give them a bit of a pump up after a bit of a tricky summer. So yeah.
Just to finish on this, Patrick, it's a bit of a political question, but while people can't do international travel to see, their family from overseas and stuff like that, what are your thoughts on athletes, professional sporting athletes and teams touring countries during the pandemic right now, and visiting countries to play cricket games and sporting competitions? I heard a few complaints about the Australian Open continuing during that lockdown that happened in Victoria. What are your thoughts on sporting competitions, professional competitions happening, and athletes being able to travel internationally during the pandemic and then play these sporting competitions?
Well, firstly, I'll say the Australian Open. It's been a great tournament, and I think they've been very lucky to be continuing. I don't agree with the argument of they're professional athletes are essential people. It's a bit of a contradiction when you've got local cricketers and local sports people who could argue the same, even though we don't get paid and we don't do the same number of hours of training. We can still argue that argument, and I think if I can't go and see my grandmother, I think I should not be able to play a tennis match. And that's just my argument. I think previously, before the whole lockdown in Victoria, I'd say, the Australian Open, go ahead. If we've got no cases, that's okay. But if you're going into a lockdown, then probably the tennis players, if you told Roger Federer, Rafael Nadal, those likes of people, and said to them, hey, guys, you can't play for 5 days, I think Rafa and that would have the common sense logic to say, well, maybe this is not a good idea. Maybe let's just let them do their 5 days of lockdown. We'll do our 5 days of lockdown with them and then play the tournament through. And the only issue is that the money aspect of it's huge. Yeah. Also, at the same time, I get the argument of why they should play as well, to keep the entertainment and keep the fans happy, which is probably not a bad thing. I think it was kind of good because we got to see some interesting people push through the ranks, especially the wild card player in Konachov, someone who I think would have gone under the radar in the first round. No one had talked about him, and he's ended up getting to a semi-final and just losing to Djokovic in 3 sets. He probably could have broke him in the third, but just got a bit unlucky playing against the world number one. But the positive thing is, they're able to get the tournament done, and I think that's a great thing and a great achievement. At the same time, there's a lot of people who would argue, like me personally, I'd say the Australian Open should just not go ahead if you don't. It should not go ahead if you've got a lockdown. And look at other sporting countries around the world. I know England are playing soccer still in the Premier League. They're still playing, and the argument is for that as well, to try and keep the fans as happy as they can. And I think Absolutely. That's not a bad way of thinking about it. At the same time, the local mum and dad will be arguing, I can't see my grandma, but these guys can kick a soccer ball around. Well, what's the difference? So, and the argument is, well, they're in hubs and all the bubbles and all this stuff, and you go, well, okay, fair enough. But I also will say this, Max, and this is something that should be pointed out. The AFL are the only competition that did not play during the lockdown in Victoria. And I know they played that one round, but after that they said, we're not playing here because we can't. So I don't see the issue. I don't see why, if they couldn't play when they had the lockdown, then why they could have played, So it's a bit of an odd one, if you know, Max, but that's how it rolls. And probably the difference is that the Australian Open is a multi-million-dollar business, same as the AFL, but probably a much more global audience to the AFL. So probably they've got more power on it. But also, to finish off finally, I'd say also it's just great that some sport can continue, and I think we've got to be very grateful that the NBA is still kicking along, and the NFL got through the Super Bowl okay, and the MLB is pushing through to try and get through spring training, and the Champions Leagues, even though it's got to play the first league in Hungary, all that stuff, they're probably happy and glad that they can get through that and play. And I think a lot of fans will be happy in that. Probably the one thing that a lot of people are delighted is sports still around, and I think that's a positive, and we'll just have to continue with it. Maybe if you don't like it, you don't like it, but at the same time, it could be worse. So you can't. It's kind of win or lose battle in that situation, and then that argument of, well, what should we should we stop the tournament or should we not? And then the other argument is if you stop a tournament, especially the Australian Open, the calendar and the tennis tournaments get all out of date by 5 days. So, the French Open gets pushed back, Wimbledon gets pushed back, all the massive APT tour events that are meant to happen, like the likes of Monte Carlo, Barcelona, they get pushed back as well at the same time. And then the other argument I have also, Max, is that the Grand Prix gets postponed to November. Now, the Grand Prix is a 3-day event. You could if the Australian Open can be held for 2 weeks with, a minimal crowd and all that stuff, then why can't the Grand Prix just be held at a normal time? And the argument is, well, they need to do 14-day quarantine. And the F1 people, who are probably the best in the world and probably proved a point to the whole sporting world, you can continue a racing circuit tournament while a pandemic is going, is because they're so much organised. And I think that's something that maybe a lot of sporting organisations probably looked at and said, well, we're going to follow what the FIA are doing with the Grand Prix and the Super Rally Championship. They were able to push through, and probably something that a lot of people realised that this is the way to follow it. And I think probably the F1 got a bit stitched up in a way. I think they could have been able to drive in March. I don't see the argument. I don't buy the argument of, they've got to do 14-day quarantine when they'll probably all be in hotels anyway for the 3 days when they're driving. So. And they get tested as well on all 3 days. So, as we saw, Lance Stroll was tested positive on the Saturday qualifying in Nuremberg, and then they brought in Nico Hülkenberg straight away. So there was no issues or complaints, and so it's quite interesting in that argument as well. But it's kind of I think tennis people will be very grateful they're able to play. I think the journalists will be proud they're able to push through and get through it. But at the same time, the general public have a feeling of distaste to, it's a bit like, well, why can you eat that food but I can't, so it's an interesting argument, but it's just great to see sport back in some form and way, and I don't mind it anyway, so that's thanks for that, Patrick. That was brilliantly well summed up. You've come from different perspectives, from the fans' perspective to someone who can't visit, their parents because they're in a nursing home. There are different aspects to it and different scenarios. But ultimately, I think having sport on during this pandemic has been so good for so many people. I understand if you don't like sport, it won't quite make sense because you don't see the value in having it on. But for so many people, it's so valuable to have sport on. And without sport being on at the moment, so many people would sort of be left without much to do, really. Like, obviously there's stuff you can do, but for example, during that 5-day lockdown, we had the Australian Open. How good's that? A lot of people watch the Australian Open. To have that on during the lockdown was so good for so many people. And I understand the athletes playing during the lockdown might not be the best thing in terms of keeping everyone safe. But ultimately, these athletes getting tested every single day or every third day, they've done 14 days quarantine, and they're providing a wonderful, they're providing great entertainment really for everyone. And I think they're kept safe. They're in these hubs. They're following the rules. Well, at least they should be. So I think it's great that sport's on. I understand that, it can be a bit of a struggle because you can't visit your mother, for example, who's in the nursing home. I think that's where that's a real tough one, because you don't want the virus to spread, and they're vulnerable to the virus. So we want to sort of keep that under control. We don't want people visiting nursing homes and stuff like that. And I think sometimes that's sort of the situation we're in, unfortunately. And it's interesting, but I certainly think it's great. And I think the argument that people can have that on and keep them psychologically refreshed and up and about, without sport on, you sort of don't get that element of life where you can watch sport and watch live sport, which is so big for millions of people. And I think it's awesome that we've got that.
and I reckon that's played a big part in getting people, keeping people ticking and keeping relationships going in terms of, you can ring your mate, talk about Novak Djokovic against Medvedev tomorrow night, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I think it's brilliant that we've got it on. And I will ask you now, as we move on, who is your tip for the Australian Open finals in the men's and women's? In the men's, we got Novak Djokovic taking on Daniil Medvedev, and then in the women's, we got Jennifer Brady against Naomi Osaka, the world number 22, against Osaka at number 3. Who are you predicting? Who are you tipping?
Well, mate, I'll tip Osaka for the women's. I think she's played a really good tournament. She really out-muscled Serena in all aspects of the court. Probably the one thing that makes her different to Ash Barty in a way is probably just there's no international pressure on her. Not international pressure. I think national pressure on her to win. I don't know how many Japanese people follow the tennis, but it's not as a massive pressure on her to perform for the country. Also, something that I think makes her just looking like Serena is the way she plays. It's so powerful. The serve is maybe the same pace as Serena was at her prime. The forehand and backhand is quality. Her net court play is excellent. And also her ground strokes are really good. And something that I just couldn't believe yesterday when I watched her play against Serena, she just did those things so right and held onto the clutch moments when she needed to. The other side of the draw, Jennifer Brady, she's come out of the clouds a little bit. Got a bit of lucky with Ash Barty getting knocked out earlier. Got away with a few wins early on. She played against some lesser opponents, which helped her get through. So a bit of luck on her way. Good on her making it. Hopefully she can cause an upset for the pundits. But, I think Osaka should do it comfortably. I wouldn't be surprised if it's 6-love, honestly. I just think Osaka is just way too good in powerful play and probably deserves it. And probably should be the world number 1. I don't discredit Ash Barty, but I just think probably if someone who's been, winning some tournaments and probably playing really consistent tennis, while Ash Barty didn't go to the French or the US due to coronavirus, and that's fair enough as well. I don't see the argument of trying to keep her a world number 1 if you haven't played a tournament, So, and that's no disrespect to Ash Barty. She's done an amazing job and great effort for her as well. She was very unlucky. I think she'll be ruining the miss opportunity she had. She probably would have made the final. If she got through, and probably would have played Osaka in the final, which would have been an epic. Would have been a 3-set match. But Osaka for me in the women's, and then for the men's, I would say it will be Djokovic in a tight 4 sets. I just think Djokovic will just power through. The interesting thing will be that both players are disliked by the fans. Last night, Medvedev was getting crucified by the fans every time he tried to serve a fault. The fans were giving it to him. So it was a big Greek crowd last night against Tsitsipas. Yeah. But again, Medvedev found a way to, get the big points, find the big shots. The one thing that's going for Medvedev is he's on this amazing run of 19 wins in a row. So if he wins the next one, it'll be 20 wins in a row, and he'll probably go up to world number 2 due to Rafael Nadal lost to Tsitsipas in that epic 5-star. So, but at the same time as well,
That stat, hang on, I'll interrupt there, Patrick, because that stat is quite interesting because Jennifer Brady and Medvedev, they've both won 20 in a row, and they're both going for their 21st win, and it's in a Grand Slam final. So that's going to be interesting.
Unique way of thinking about it, Max. Jeez. But I think Djokovic will just do it tight. But we could be speaking about a Medvedev win. Both players are disliked by the fans, which makes it weird. I think other sport journal would say the same thing as well. Probably Djokovic just has the better power and play. The one thing that Djokovic was interesting was last Friday, as you remember, Max, he was playing against Taylor Fritz, and Taylor Fritz had him on toast.
The injury cloud.
And then the crowd were getting involved, and there's a big American contingent there, and the Serbian crowd were getting quiet down a bit, and then Djokovic got animated and started chucking rackets around and all these usual antics, and then
The
hit
crowd
11 thirty. The umpire said, fans, you all got to leave. And then after that, I think Djokovic must have found a way to just psych his opponent out and probably, making up the. I don't think he made it up. He had a abdominal injury. He had a abdominal injury, and I'm being serious. He did have it, and I think he kind of just pushed through the pain. And probably what's helped him is he's maybe had a lot more lesser games, is in terms of they're not being pushed. While Medvedev's, what we hit as well, Max, is Medvedev's coach and him were blooming on early on in the tournament. So that makes it more interesting and makes it an interesting dynamic. I think last night Medvedev just played so much better against Tsitsipas, just in ground strokes, in general play. And Tsitsipas looked really tired. It looks interesting though, Max, with everyone who's backed up playing 5-setters, they're not being able to back up. Dominic Thiem, Dimitrov, and also maybe Medvedev, I don't know, but and Tsitsipas as well. They just they look like they get tired. Nadal, same thing. They can't back up that epic 5-setter and just push on. Djokovic has been able to do that, and I think the good thing for Djokovic is that he's been able to. He played a pretty easy semi-final against the qualifier in Kucherov, and now we'll play Medvedev, who's a very different player to the qualifier. So, and someone that he knows he can beat him. So that'll be interesting. I think the one thing that's going for Djokovic is probably there'll be a less anti-crowd for him and more anti-crowd for Medvedev. So that's going to make an issue. But I think it'll be a tight 4-setter. Probably might go 3 hours. It'll be 4 sets. I think Djokovic will just find a way in the end to get the win and record his next Grand Slam. I think he wins 19 Grand Slams if he wins it. So it'll be one off Federer and Nadal. So, yeah, it'll be interesting. Thanks for your thoughts, Patrick. Appreciate it. And, I think you've picked 2 winners there. From the research I've done and from the viewing of the Australian Open, I think you're right. And look, I just hope it's close. That's all I want, really. I always love to see a close contest. So that'll be great. But I know you've got to go off to a cricket game now, so all the best for that. And thanks for coming on again, and I really appreciate your thoughts. Absolute pleasure, Max, and hope we'll talk soon. And now we're going to welcome our next guest onto the Sports Hour, a regular of the show, Mr. Charlie Gill. How you going today?
I'm going great. Max, as always, thank you for having me on.
It's a pleasure, and it's great to have you on. And today we're going to talk a little bit of tennis and the Australian Open. It's getting down to the business end of the tournament with the men's final on tomorrow night and the women's final on Saturday. Now, the show is actually going live on air, or it's going on air. I meant to say on Monday. So we're going to be talking. We're sort of previewing the show, and then they're going to be hearing everything we've said about it after the events have happened. That's fine because we want to get some predictions, and we will look at our predictions after the events have happened. So you're going to be scrutinised unless you get all your predictions right. So a bit of pressure on, and we'll kick it off with the men's singles final between Novak Djokovic and Medvedev. Daniil Medvedev. And what are your thoughts? The world number 1 against the world number 4 in Medvedev. Who wins this one and why?
Yeah, well, I'll just sort of start off with, I think, what my just sort of base prediction is, which I think it's going to be Djokovic in 5 sets, which is not the outcome that I want. The outcome I want would be Medvedev in 5 sets, a good game, and I'd like to see Medvedev win. I'm not the biggest fan of Novak. I've got nothing against him, though. It's just I'm a big fan of Roger and Rafa as well, and I don't really want to see. I want them to continue to be considered the best. Though some people might say Djokovic already is the best ever, but for me, it's always going to be Roger. But regardless of that, the reason I think it's
sounds
going to be
like you've got a lot against Novak.
No. Look, it's just
spit it out.
I never really support him when he's going. Like, for instance, I was going very hard for Karatsev Karatsev
Yep.
in their semi-final. And yeah, I guess just Djokovic's sort of vibe on court, I don't really doesn't really resonate with me.
Fair enough.
But and also like I would have loved to see Karatsev make the final because he's like the first person in history, because it's his Grand Slam debut and he would have been the first person in history to make the final. Well, he was the first person in history to make the semi-final, and it just would have been a fairy tale, etc.
Yeah.
But I
The
think
Joker.
that Medvedev can push Djokovic, because if you watch that semi-final, Djokovic versus Karatsev, like Djokovic was just so good and just sort of like completely unbeatable. And Karatsev going to that match was like the key facets of his game was how hard he could hit the ball. Like he had the top speeds, I think, for forehands and backhands in the tournament until he got kicked out. Like he had the fastest backhand and forehand, and also he was good at breaking. I think I'm pretty sure he had broken his opponent's serve the most of anyone up until when he got eliminated, and he just wasn't able to really do that against Djokovic. He didn't hit sort of like massive like winners that flew past Djokovic, because Djokovic is so good at getting the ball back, and I don't think he ever broke Djokovic. I watched the whole game, I should remember, but I'm not sure. But I don't think he ever did. Or if he did, Djokovic broke right back. Yeah. So,
in terms of Djokovic, I've got a question, and with the serving, who I saw Medvedev play last week, and it was on Friday. He played against Tsitsipas, and his serving seemed to be really good. That was something that I saw, and I thought, wow, his serving looks a bit better than anyone else's I've seen this Australian Open. Is it fair to say that that's the case, and that he will be really effective if he serves very well? And I think he has a better serve than Djokovic. No, Medvedev. His serve looked quality against Tsitsipas when I watched that game. Is that true? Is it fair to say that he serves better than Djokovic?
To be honest, I'm not quite sure. Djokovic is such a robot that I can't really, I wouldn't really be able to point out any flaws in his game, or even, don't know enough about tennis to point out the obvious things that Medvedev does better than Djokovic, because Djokovic does so many things so well. The thing about Medvedev is he's so tall. He's 198 centimeters, and he can just sort of like cover the court really quickly. And I'm not sure if it was just because Tsitsipas was off, but he was constantly breaking Tsitsipas or being close or like almost breaking Tsitsipas throughout the whole match. Whenever Tsitsipas had a second serve, Medvedev was able to return it pretty easily, punch it into one of the corners, and Tsitsipas is on the back foot. So the reason my prediction is Djokovic in 5 is because Djokovic is a robot that has won 8, I think, Australian Opens so far, and is, you just have to call, of course, he's going to be the favourite. But Medvedev has won something like 21 games in a row, I think it was, 21 matches in a row. I think it was like 11 of which was against top 10 players, which is extremely impressive. You'd be fair to call him the best player in the world at the moment, I reckon. So he's got so much momentum that I think that he will be able to push Djokovic, but Djokovic has been in this game a long time. He has, he's pretty clutch, I have to say. Like, he always sort of turns on and can sort of do what he needs to do in those big moments. I'm thinking, there's lots of examples, but the one that's close to my heart that was heartbreaking for me was in the Wimbledon final, I think, of 2019, when Federer had, I think, a couple of championship points. Djokovic saved both of them and went on to win the championship. And that was heartbreaking for me, but it's just a testament to how good Djokovic is in pressure situations. So I think Medvedev can push him, but just due to Djokovic's experience, he's going to win in 5 sets. And hopefully it is a 5-setter, because after 2 relatively anticlimactic semi-finals, we deserve a big final. And I think it's definitely possible. And I think that that's the most likely outcome, that it will be sort of a marathon. The other reason I think Djokovic is going to win is because he's got extra time to recover. and they're both just coming off 3-setters. So the odds are definitely in Djokovic's favour, but I think Medvedev can push him pretty far.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully we're not sitting here. Our listeners will be sitting here on a Monday listening right now. Hopefully they're not laughing at us right now about our predictions. And
the other thing I want to see is I'd like to see some drama on court, because Medvedev is really good at that, and that's one of the reasons I like him. And I was going to go for him regardless against Djokovic, but I actually really like Medvedev because he's pretty funny. And you can just sort of look. It was interesting actually because he played Tsitsipas last night, obviously, and they have got a bit of a rivalry. Well, not so much of a rivalry because I think the record is 5-1. The win-loss record is 5-1. The head-to-head record is 5-1 in Medvedev's favour. But there's a pretty funny YouTube video where they have sort of a disagreement on court after some match in some tournament. And Medvedev is saying to Tsitsipas, like, look, if you want to fight, come say it to my face and stuff. And then Medvedev, of course, has had the sort of the run in the US Open. I can't remember what year it was, but he was just getting completely booed by the American fans. And he said in an interview afterwards, thanks for booing me because it's just fueling me. It's going to be enough to fuel me for the next 5 matches. And then he literally, I think, won the next 5 matches and got to the final and lost to Nadal, I think, in a 5-setter. And
I think Djokovic is the exact same. He loves that
yeah, you're right.
Energy.
You're right. The
from
only
the crowd.
difference is that Djokovic, I mean, I'm sure Medvedev would love, support. But I can just sort of see in Djokovic that he can't seem to work out exactly why, and it really annoys him that he doesn't have the sort of level of fan support that Nadal and especially Federer have, who are both just like so successful and are both just sort of winning machines. And yet, despite that, they still have such support from sort of everyone. Like even though Australians, they say like sort of love an underdog, Roger still gets so much support, and so does Nadal. Meanwhile, Djokovic in almost every game he plays is not, he hasn't got like the majority of the fans with him, and that was even before the whole COVID thing happened.
There's been.
While I think Djokovic wishes that the crowd was with him, I'm sort of playing up Medvedev as a bit of a sort of cartoonish sort of villain, but I reckon he doesn't mind the crowd isn't with him. He sort of likes it, and it fuels his game, and it it's just sort of funny.
Yeah.
So, but despite that, though, I think that the crowd is going to be on Medvedev's side in the final because of the underdog factor and because of the anti-Djokovic factor, I guess.
That's right. And look, it's the way it's the way you carry yourself. And I think the issue with Djokovic this tournament is when he came out and started trying to take over the Department of Health in Australia and bring in some new rules around COVID and what players should be and should do and can't do. And I think when he did that, it didn't come across well to supporters and Australians. But
even before that, he never was able to get the sort of support that Federer and Nadal get. Sort of no matter what, because I don't know.
Yeah. Well, there was another thing. It's the injury cloud. It's the injury cloud that he has, the Joker, and they've mentioned that he got injured. After the game, he's like, I tore my calf and I won't be able to play. That was probably about 3 matches ago, and since then, from that interview, he actually said, I might not be able to play the next round. I don't know.
Well, he loves doing that, to be honest. That's another reason why I'm not the biggest fan of Djokovic, because he's got a history of sort of playing up the injuries on court. I'm not saying that he's faking every time, but he has a history of sort of taking injury breaks at the, right time with like an errant thumb or something that wasn't bothering him until his opponent's gotten a little bit momentum, and then suddenly it starts to bother him. But he's not really the only player to do that. So I
don't think that injury is affecting him at all. I think that's fair to say.
He said after the game.
Yeah,
he said after the semi-final, he's never felt as good as he is at the moment.
There you go.
Which is another reason to back him in with the final. I don't know what the gambling odds are, but
he's just favourite. It's like $1.
Yeah, okay.
$1.90.
Interesting. It's going to be a good final, actually. Like that.
Well,
it's going to be a good final.
And we move over. Yeah, and I think It's going to be interesting. I think Djokovic has definitely I think he's got the edge over him, but you never know. You just never know. And Medvedev, I don't think, it's just going to be, it's going to be close. But I think Djokovic, he's got the experience and everything, and he's just got the edge over him.
Yeah.
And then we move over to the women's final, which is on Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
And Jennifer Brady against Naomi Osaka. Jennifer Brady is ranked 22 in the world, and Naomi Osaka number 3. She beat Serena Williams, and she beat Sui Su, who was a very she was an up and coming tennis star this tournament, which I enjoyed actually watching her. I watched her early in the tournament, and she did very well to get to that point. That was actually the quarterfinals, so that was good on her. But I think Naomi Osaka goes into this one pretty comfortable favourites. Is that fair to say? Is that what you think, Charlie?
It's true. Like, there's a bit more sort of potential for surprise, or there's a little bit more unpredictability in the results mainly just because of the fact that it's only best of 3 sets. And, you'd think that the longer, a match stretches, the sort of more, the more consistent the result's going to be. I'm trying to put it into words correctly. So, like, over 5 sets, those that have, like, the best endurance are going to sort of win more regularly. But when the match goes for a less amount of time, it sort of means that there's sort of more to sort of pack into a shorter amount of time, sort of more energy. And so it can be a bit more unpredictable. And maybe that's also why, aside from Serena Williams, of course, there hasn't been like a big 4 or a big 3 in women's tennis the same way there is in men's tennis. In women's tennis, it's sort of more like there's always Serena, and there's great players that can consistently, compete in Grand Slams and sometimes win finals. But it's sort of more of a bit more bit more up in the air on who's going to get far in the tournaments. And that's why women's tennis can sometimes be more entertaining than men's tennis because of the unpredictability. I think I went to the Australian Open a couple of weeks ago, I think, for the second round. And I saw Berrettini versus Kevin Anderson, the South African. And then after that, Gavrilova came on and she played. I can't remember who she played. I think it was a Spaniard. But the Berrettini versus Anderson game was just sort of quite, predictable. They were just holding serve, and it was straight sets, and it wasn't, that exciting. Whereas in the Gavrilova game, it was a little bit more, it seemed like it was easier for the opponent to break.
And
again, I'm not actually sure if that's true or not.
The serving gives the returner a bit more of a chance. Like, I think that makes
I don't know. That's why I don't know. Like, I mean, I'm not sure about that because it could be. Because, like, Serena can still, like, I'm just using her as an example. She can, like, still, like smash serves so hard. Like, can't remember the actual measurement in terms of speed. But, like, it's not like it's going to be easier, I think, for someone facing Serena Williams for a woman facing Serena Williams to break Serena Williams than it is for, like, say, a man facing Kyrgios to break Kyrgios. So I'm not sure, actually, but maybe. There'd be statistics that can tell you whether breaking a serve is...
Yeah.
It's probably actually a pretty, like, well-known thing, but I don't know, like, amongst in tennis, that whether it's easier to break in women's tennis or not. I'm not actually sure, but for some reason it seems like it will be to me.
So you think... I had a few audio difficulties just before, but did you say Osaka for this game? To win?
I didn't actually say who I thought would win, but I think Osaka will win.
Yeah, and it'll go to 3 sets.
No, I reckon straight sets.
Well, let's hope that it's a close game. That's what I hope for in these matches, because it leaves a bit of a what's the word? just the feeling. Anyway, it doesn't feel like I'm fulfilled when the game ends after 2 sets or after 3 sets for the men. I always want it to go a bit longer. But it's a pleasure to have you on today, Charlie, and thanks for your thoughts on the Australian Open. It's been a great tournament. The one last question I just want to ask you, and I just need it to be a quick answer because the show's been a long one today. But were you happy for the Australian Open to continue over the lockdown in Victoria?
Well, I guess it depends on what the alternatives were. I love the tennis, so I want the tennis to be on. And I mean, what's the other option? That we sort of have a pause for 5 days and then the crowds come back and the matches start back up after the 5 days of lockdown is over? That could have been fine as well. I would have been happy with that. Pretty much, I just like the tennis and I like when it's on. So well done to the, I guess, the government for getting it right with the Australian Open. I mean, if they did, who knows, maybe there's still some more mistakes to be made. But, I'm just glad that the tennis was on in the first place.
Great. Thanks for that. And I think a lot of people were happy that the tennis was on, and I think it provides a wonderful outlet for people during the lockdown to watch the tennis and sort of...
It would have been especially great if, De Minaur and Gavrilova and Barty and Kyrgios could have gotten further. That would have been, something to remember.
That last name.
The Australians sort of keeping up the morale while we're all in lockdown. It didn't eventuate that way, but it would have been good. But,
yeah. And can you tell us about the excitement machine, Kyrgios? Just last thing. What was your excitement levels like? Can you describe that match Kyrgios played against Tsitsipas? Can you describe your feeling?
Tsitsipas, did he?
Say that again.
Did he play Tsitsipas? I don't think he did.
It was Dominic Thiem. My apologies. When he played Dominic Thiem.
I mean, it was a great game. It was a great game, and he's a rock star. And I just hope that he can continue to, try hard, because if he wins a Grand Slam, especially if he wins an Australian Open, the hype is going to be out of this world. You know what I'm saying?
Massive. He's
He's
almost as big as he's not as big as Federer, Djokovic, or Nadal, but I reckon he's a close fourth. I reckon he's a close fourth to them, because he is an entertainment beast, and I hope he continues to keep doing his big boy things and just keep bringing the crowds. That's what he does. He's a king.
Yeah, I agree.
But Charlie, thanks for coming on. Great to have you on. Great to have your thoughts on the Australian Open. And let's hope our predictions are safe and sound when the show goes on air. Thank you, Charlie.
They will be. I'm 100% confident. And if I'm incorrect in any way, I will streak Brunswick Street Oval. The audience can hold me to that. This has been Charlie Gill, signing off in the Sports Hour.
And that just about wraps up the show for today. I hope you've enjoyed it. There was plenty in there for you this week. Different sports, different events, different opinions. But I hope you've enjoyed it. It's been a great show, and feel free to jump on our Twitter page at SportsHourFM. Give us a follow, and you'll be keeping up to date with everything that's happening. Likewise with the BRIMBANK Neighbourhood House Facebook page. Jump on that, like that one as well. And of course, Live FM and Making Media, run by Ralph Barba. That's a fantastic page, and he's the one that really brings this show together for us and allows it to happen here on BRIMBANK Live. So thanks very much once again for tuning into the Sports Hour on BRIMBANK Live and Live FM. I hope you have a great week, and thank you very much.
With thanks to the City of BRIMBANK across our neighbourhood and the world, the Sports Hour with Max Hatzoglou on BRIMBANK Live on Live FM.